in this next panel, we'll be hearing from Christian Lequesne from Sciences Po Paris, from Anna-Lena Hoegenauer from the University of Luxembourg, and from Eva Heidbreder from the University of Magdeburg. So we're looking here at France, at Germany, and at Luxembourg. And Christian, I'm going to ask you to start.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. It's a very good opportunity for me also to have a broad view about the debate in this country and also the position of the other member states. Let me start saying a brief word about the debate in the French society, and I'm insisting that this is about the society. Well, there is very little debate, to tell you the truth. This is not something which is captivating the French society. And of course, we have some articles in the press when Michel Barnier and David Davis start a new round of negotiation, but that's it. It's the same for the mainstream politicians in general. They have little interest. Well, if you move now to more specialized public, well, we don't have at this stage so much debate in the sphere of businessmen. It's starting, but it would be probably more important when we will know a bit more about the future agreement. There is a clear strategy from the British diplomacy to target the businessman. It's a very interesting experience of public diplomacy, probably because it's a bit difficult to have a real influence on the political sphere, on the administration. Well, the target is the business community, and it's exactly the same in Germany, so far as I understood. There's a recent declaration from the Handelskammer in Germany saying that we have to move forward with a negotiation on the new relation. Some societal interests, very small but sometimes vocal, are interested. This is the fisherman. For a very good reason, is that if you take the fishermen from northern France, Normandy and Brittany, they make currently 50% of the catches in the British waters. So this is representing a revenue of more than €1 million per year. What about the problem of the French living in this country? Well, again, not so much debate. I mean, the debate you had about the future of the French in the UK was more in London than in France, right? And this is also the part of the negotiation where you had real progress. And then I suspect there's also not so much support from the society, because sometimes, which is not true, in fact, when you take the diversity of the people living in this country and working in this country, but sometimes we consider that those people, they're just those who don't want to pay their taxes in France. This is why they're in London, etc. So you don't have a natural tendency to support them. What about Mr. Macron? Well, Macron's narrative, as you know, is very much based on the future of the EU now, with a relaunch of the Franco-German relationship. So Brexit for him is a counter-narrative. And that's an interesting thing. Well, what he wants to do is a hardcore, organized around the revised Eurozone. So he's not speaking a lot about Brexit, but probably Brexit is the opposite of what shall be done for Mr. Macron, you know what I mean? And well, sometimes in a very subtle way, he said that in his speeches. Sir Michael said that we don't know what Mr. Macron wants about the relationships with the UK, well, we know what it does not want. I suspect that what he does not want is full single market for the UK. That's not something which will be possible. The UK will have to be treated as a third country, and on the budgetary aspect, well, he probably wants to have more guarantee on what the UK is prepared to pay, and that means general mood in the French administration when we need to have a methodology to calculate. At the end, of course, we will have a compromise, but I'm not sure that 20 billion will be enough. Because there is a memory, there's a political memory about also the budgetary negotiations with the UK. You know, everybody remembers 1984, Mrs. Thatcher, etc., etc. So I was at the British Embassy recently, and there was somebody from the ministry exciting Europe, and he said, well, you know, it's very emotional, this question of money in the UK, which is true, but it's not only in the UK that it's emotional. You know, it's emotional in many states of the EU. To finish, let me just say that there is an increase of the number of British citizens who ask for French membership, an increase of more than 200% between 2015 and 2017, and that's particularly true in the southwest of the country. And this is very much in the press, you know, French citizens helping their British neighbors to fill the very complicated dossier to get the French membership, the French citizenship. This is something which is publicized. So no xenophobia or things like this against the British expatriate in the wake of the British Brexit decision. And most of these people, you know, went to the press during the campaign to say that they were against Brexit. So this is something, this message is also has been kept. Well, let me just finish to say that if there is no real concern for Brexit in this country, this is directly the result of the politics of minimalist engagement or semi-detached membership, which was pursued by all the British government since 1973. Okay, there's this conviction, well, you know, they never played the game. This is the mood in the society. And I remember very well the debate when we had the referendum in this country. People said, well, it could give ideas to Eurosceptics, because France has Eurosceptics, of course, to leave the EU. But no, this is not the debate. Even among the most Eurosceptics of the Front National, you find a majority of people who are in favor of remaining inside the EU and remaining in the Eurozone. It was a big mistake for Mrs. Le Pen to go with this argument, leaving the Eurozone, because this is not what the French electorate wants. So for us, and this is my last word, it's interesting because maybe when we are analyzing Brexit, of course, we have to see what's the general trend and what is idiosyncrasy. Maybe there's more idiosyncrasy in the Brexit process than we thought when the process started after the referendum. I'm not sure there is a huge support of public opinions in continental Europe, even in countries where you have Eurosceptic parties, and it's quite a lot, for leaving the EU. There is something specific to this country. Thank you.
Eva.
All right, time's short, so I'll try to be very precise. There's one starting point for the German position as it is today, and that is the single market and the functioning of the EU. That's what we're interested in, full stop. Put yourself in those shoes, and hopefully all I'm saying now will fall logically into place. Actually, Chancellor Merkel said that quite clearly on the occasion of the joint French-German press conference when passing the guidelines. She didn't say who cares about Brexit, but she said the future of the EU 27 has preference over Brexit, full stop. Okay, what does that mean? First, it means the EU is a rule-based legal polity and to preserve the single market, and that's what we do. Orderly exit means we have Article 50, we follow Article 50 in 2 stages. That's how we do it. Orderly exit means we follow the legal procedures because we want to preserve the single market. This is saying also in March 19, the UK will be out, whatever. Germany is saying that with high regret. It is not in the German interest at all. The UK is one of the closest policy allies in the EU Germany has. But that is the orderly exit and procedure. Now, how do you preserve the single market in this situation of Brexit? You stick to the rules, and then there's various options. Preferably a very soft exit to continue as much as we did until now. But if that's not possible, cliff edge is an option, and that has been thought of, and that is a scenario calculated through from the beginning. So it is like, what do you want, UK? What do you want? That is the big question there, and we'll follow the rules in that direction. Threatening the UK or scaring off anyone, maybe that was a little bit of a notion right in the beginning after the referendum, but right after the referendum, public opinion polls in Germany skyrocketed to EU support prior the EU crisis. And this general notion that I mentioned, that the EU is a value, preserving the single market, is widely shared everywhere. A lot of people in the UK wonder about the automobile industry. The chairman of the umbrella organization says exactly this. Preserving the single market is much more important to us than trade with the UK. That's what we're up to. Now, so business, civil society is behind that, and to understand what will happen in the second round, because it will get more tricky there, that's when the single interest will get on the table. Germany is, of course, a highly complex federal system with a lot of veto players. Since March, an incredible administrative network has been set up, both horizontally between the federal level, the Länder that have regular meetings, the Länder have gone through a screening process, what their particular interests are, they're being collected, vertically between the different ministries, and also the Foreign Office has involved in discourse with business regularly, every second week I think, and with civil society to take everybody along. And what I think we see now on the EU level, if the question has come up that what are the details the EU want? They are being negotiated internally now. And I think the UK is actually losing time. And Anna asked about the divide and rule strategy. As time passes, and Germany definitely internally is sorting out its differences in interests, you will maybe end up with getting a set of fixed interests and details, but they have been pre-negotiated so much internally that there's very little room to negotiate. So in that sense, that's my personal estimation of the state of negotiation. This first phase was also a phase to test how can we negotiate and set up a system. Waiting for details, they have been, if this dialogue doesn't build these structures to negotiate, I think the danger is that the details will be so pre-negotiated, definitely inside Germany, but also on the EU level amongst the 27, under this goal that we have to preserve the future of the EU 27. Last point, because I'm always puzzled by the question. I agree the UK is a different partner than Switzerland and Turkey, etc. And I have to speak in a metaphor here, because I think that explains best what is meant by we have to preserve the single market and the future of the EU 27. Imagine we're playing a board game. Maybe not Monopoly, but Settlers of Catan, to be a bit constructive here. And one player is getting off the table and says, we won't throw dice, we won't do that anymore, but we'll still be on the board. This is the understanding. You can't get off the game table, you can't walk off and say, but I'm still on the board, but I don't throw dice, I just move my pin, right? And therefore, it's clearly, and the Chancellor said that clearly, well, who cares about Brexit? It's about the future of the EU 27. Put yourself in those shoes, and I think a lot falls in place. And that has been done with a lot of regret. It's been done with a lot of regret.
Thank you, Eva.
Yes, so I'm going to talk about the situation in Luxembourg, and I think there, like in many countries, there was an overwhelming majority of people and also of parties against Brexit before the referendum. But they adapted very quickly, so after the referendum now public opinion is actually in favor of Brexit, and they say, well, the referendum went the way it went, now Britain has to leave, and that's that. So the government's position on that is that the negotiations shouldn't be punitive. So it's not about punishing Britain, but they made it very clear that now the negotiations are about defending the interest of the Union, so of the 27, and of course for them also the Luxembourgish interests. So it's not about giving gifts, and I think that plays into what the previous speakers were saying. By and large, Luxembourg is strongly supportive of the EU position on pretty much every issue, especially now in this first phase of negotiations about exit bills and all that. It does have one issue that will probably come up at a later stage. I'm not sure if it's a particularly good divide and conquer issue, and that's the financial markets, basically the financial centers. Because for Luxembourg, finance is a big issue, for Britain, of course, as well. And so Luxembourg has very specific ideas on what it wants. So it's not entirely true that the EU doesn't know what it wants. I can tell you quite exactly what Luxembourg wants on that. What it wants is basically that, British financial actors can have passporting rights and access to the internal market capital and all this, but under the condition that they play by all the rules and regulations. And if they don't do that, then the second preferred option is hard Brexit. No access, no obedience with the rules, and that's fine. And so they've looked at the kind of economy and how it will react, and they think that that is actually a viable option. The worst case scenario for Luxembourg is basically what some of the hardline Brexiters have outlined, that you retain passporting rights, but you make your own rules. And in that case, that would be seen as a competitive advantage for London. You might actually have actors moving out of Luxembourg. And the Luxembourgish foreign minister has said, we have to remember, no deal is better than a bad deal. That is true also for Luxembourg. So that is the one red line, even though they don't call it a red line, but where you might actually get a no vote in the end, if that plays out in the wrong way. And that sort of plays into the same thing as Germany in the internal market. It's more important here to protect Europe and the Europe of 27 than to look after one trade partner. But because the two markets are so interlinked, they would of course prefer no economic disruption and just everything to more or less stay as it is at the moment. So the thing is, we have elections next year in 2018. They are quite late, they are in autumn, so hopefully, the hope is that the negotiations will be over by then, more or less. But at the moment, the negotiations don't go so well, so they might still be ongoing. Will these elections play a role? If the Luxembourgish government changes, and that is quite likely, will that have an impact? And the answer is no. We have only two Eurosceptical parties, one on the right and one on the left, that are fairly small. They are not in the government at the moment, and they will not be in government after the next elections. That's basically definite. All the other parties are basically broadly agreed on the financial sector, but also on EU negotiations, like, for example, that the free movement of people is linked to the free movement of capital, of goods, and all of these things. So that is intrinsically linked. So you won't see much of a political shift there. And even the Eurosceptic, the Eurocritical parties, because they're not Eurosceptic, like the ADR on the right or D-Link, so the left on the left, actually, by British standards, fairly pro-European. So, for instance, the populist right is in favor of a multi-speed Europe, and they do believe that membership is more valuable or has brought Luxembourg a lot of benefits, and they don't want to leave the European Union. So from that perspective, they're still quite pro-European. And the same about lobbying. Is there any chance of kind of lobbying for a position that is close to Britain? No. So the major actors in the finance area, like the Luxembourgish Bankers Association, the Association of the Luxembourg Fund Industry, and the insurance industry seem to have adapted to the fact that it will probably in this sector be either a very soft Brexit, so kind of regulations will be maintained and access will be maintained, or a fairly hard Brexit. So different rules for Britain, but also no access. And they are starting to switch towards towards trying to benefit from attracting new actors from the city, basically, because I think there's an assumption that that will be more or less the outcome of the negotiation. And Luxembourg is doing quite well in terms of insurance industry, for instance. So there's also a feeling now that in terms of the economy, there won't be much of a hit. Originally, the assumption was for a long time that the Luxembourgish economy would suffer from Brexit. But at the moment, the assumption is it will either slightly benefit or slightly suffer, but it won't be very dramatic. So there's also no economic pressure at the moment on the government to worry too much about it. Let's put it this way.
Great. Thanks very much.